Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Ohio Valley Real Estate Report. My name is Johnny Kazumka. I'm broadcasting with my real estate partner here, Scott Connors.
How's it going, Johnny?
I'm doing very well. So, Scott, I'm going to call you, let me throw my gum away real quick. I'm going to call you Captain Controversy because of last week we made a podcast together and you had brought up some key tips or some key points about interest rates and how long you would have had to wait for them to drop. So, do you want to refresh us of what happened? And
Yeah. Seems like we got their attention last week.
Sure.
So the key stat was in 1972, rates were just over 7%. And if you were a buyer in 1972 and said, I'm going to wait for rates to come down before I buy, you would have had to wait 21 years before rates came back down below that number. And so facing rates that have gone up quite a bit in the last year or so, we're hearing that comment from a lot of buyers. Hey, we're just going to wait for rates to come down. We're not sure that's the best plan.
Yeah, and it's we're saying that specifically because of where we are in the world, in the country.
Correct.
Right? We're not saying it's not it's an opportunistic time to buy. I would say a couple years ago would have been the most opportunistic based off interest rates alone. What we're talking about is our market and the conditions. And so the feedback that we got from some of those videos, some of it was at least supportive, but a bulk of it was, oh, these guys are, so what we had the idea to do today is to go over some of these comments and to address them on screen.
Yeah,
and
let's
to
talk to
about
them. Let's do it.
All right, comment number 1 that we had. Solution to getting rich: buy a house in 1970. So do you want to take this one?
I love this one. You're right. And the obvious answer is talk to me in 20 years. And the solution to getting rich is going to be buy a house in 2023.
Yeah.
That always works, right? Real estate is the one investment, especially here locally in the Valley, that it pretty much always goes up. Like we've never really had a big major downturn.
Yeah, and even the downturns that we have had, they're not so significant. Where we've always said, and even in past podcasts, the Ohio Valley is relatively immune to the large scale factor. So when people are talking about market crashes or this and that, you're not wrong at a macroscopic level.
Yeah.
We're talking centrally the Ohio Valley.
Sure.
So interest rates are high, but the interest rates may go up and down and change. We can point to any index that you want to measure and say the pricing in the Ohio Valley has never really gone down.
It never really has gone down.
Yeah.
I talk to my sellers all the time when they talk about, should we list now? Should we wait till spring? Should we wait to see what the election does? Are we going to see if rates come down? And my advice is the same, and it would be the same to buyers, which is don't try to time the market. When you're trying to time the market because you think either prices are going to go up if you're a seller, or rates are going to come down if you're a buyer, they might or they might not. But I can tell you that every buyer I've ever worked with who decided to wait to buy ended up paying more for their house than they would have had they bought when they initially wanted to. And that's got to do with interest rates or price, both really. And so again, in 1972, if you're going to wait, so the people who were going to buy in 1972 decided to wait, ended up buying in 1974 and paid 9.5% or 10%. And so the question is, what's going to happen now? I don't know if rates are going up next year. Neither do you.
Correct.
I do know that real estate in the Ohio Valley is one of the safest places to be in terms of investments. And so you buy that house now. I've never had a client come back to me to sell their home a year or 2 or 5 or 10 later that their house is worth less than what they paid for it.
Absolutely.
It just doesn't happen.
And that was the takeaway. I'd rather buy a house at 1970s pricing, even if the interest rates are the same, than buying a house in 1990 when prices would have doubled. And the same thing. So let's go to the next comment because I believe there was one about the crisis of 2008. The best time to buy was always 5 years ago, said nobody in 2011. And that came from Jonathan Taylor. So in 2011, we're talking about a tumultuous time. We're talking about the recession from 2008. People were recovering.
Yeah.
But I would argue that if you bought in the Ohio Valley in 2011, what do you think their house is worth today?
Without question, it's worth more. There's no question about it. And so 2011 was a hot market. You and I were both in the business then. It was a seller's market. There wasn't much inventory. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
Buyers were complaining about prices being too high. And everyone who bought a house in 2011, if you're not sure, call us and we'll sell it for you for more than what you paid for it.
Not just that. If you bought a house with any land in 2011,
without a question.
what happened the next year?
Unbelievable. We all learned about mineral rights, didn't we?
Oil and gas. If you bought land in 2011 and before the landmen and the oil and gas companies were here, there have been people that bought properties for hundreds of thousands that became millionaires.
Yep.
That is not a joke.
I sold some of those. One of my favorite sales that I remember was about a 35-acre farm that sold, I want to say in 2010, for something like $95,000. And within a couple years, that value quadrupled at least, just in terms of mineral rights. So it's the same thing, and we're kind of beating a dead horse here. I was going to say beating a dead drum. That's not quite the same thing. We're going to beat this dead horse, but the answer is buying real estate in Ohio Valley is almost always a smart play.
We are immune to the significant major, the macroscopic level of the national
Economic forces.
Correct.
Absolutely.
Thank you for bailing me out there. All right, next comment. What do we have here? Who cares about interest rates? The prices are record high. We've been waiting, and it's paid off. Prices have started to come down 50 to 100,000 year over year, all while the inventory is piling up. Which, again, I would say is probably a real thing at a nationwide
in
level.
other markets, right?
The Ohio Valley doesn't crash $100,000 because the median sales price in the Ohio Valley is probably $150,000.
Yes, we love the comments we get on these, and I would challenge anyone in our comments for this podcast, please share with me an example of a house in the Ohio Valley that the value has come down by 50 or 100K, please, because it doesn't exist. And to suggest that inventory is piling up, absolutely not true.
Sure.
We looked at these numbers just last week, and right now we're sitting on about 2 months worth of
2.5.
inventory? 2.5 months worth of inventory. That's not inventory piling up.
That's low.
It's very low. And even in an environment where maybe the buying activity has slowed a little bit, inventory ain't piling up. A good house hits the market and we sell it immediately.
Sure. Yeah, and we're still seeing, what was the ratio? 96% of asking price for
96
last month.
That's correct. So there is absolutely no indicator, no data that says the market has slowed, that values have come down, or that inventory is piling up. It's simply not true.
Yeah. Next comment. What do we have here? Yeah, some people are too disconnected to understand that. Here in Canada, which is kind of what we're talking about, some people can't even buy back their house because of the price doubling in less than 2 years. So you mentioned we're not quite sure what you mean by buying back.
So I think what that commenter means is that people are in a home that they couldn't afford to buy if they had to buy it today, which is a pretty awesome place to be if you think about it.
That would be the whole purpose of buying real estate, right?
Exactly right. And one of my favorite stories about this actually has to do with Spike Lee, of all people. So Spike Lee grew up in Brooklyn in a pretty rundown neighborhood. His mom still lives in the same house that she lived in, 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Wow.
It's now worth about $3 million. a home that, they were struggling to get by when they bought it or whatever point that was in the past.
Sure.
And so I'd love to be in a position where I couldn't afford my house. What that means is that the value of my house has gone up so dramatically that, I'm staying, right? That's awesome.
Yeah, and that's a direct correlation to pricing. Maybe not interest rate, where if the interest rate doubles and now you can't afford it, but you got locked in before, then
Right.
So if that's what he's trying to say, because of that alone, that would kind of negate what we just talked about. But here in the Ohio Valley, which is the continuous part of this conversation,
Yeah.
the pricing is what continues to go up. The interest rate fluctuates a lot, up or down, or making it sometimes more opportunistic, if you will.
Yeah.
But even if you buy today and the interest rate goes down, refinance. But your house is going to be worth more tomorrow.
That's exactly right.
So, all right, and we got one more, I believe, here. This was the one, I want to say that was on TikTok, if it's going to load. Let me pull this up here. It's a little small on my screen. So it says, mute that. These guys would have told you the same thing before 2008. The problem, obviously, is price and not the interest rate.
He's right. I would have told you the same thing before 2008.
Well, that's the whole point. And my response to this, let's see, this is Sam Hogan here replying. The reply to this is, I'm not quite sure what you mean. Those who bought in 2008 are currently selling their homes for double, which is exactly what we are talking about on this podcast. I don't pretend to have a crystal ball.
Nope.
Or to say that I know. If I know when I'm at the bottom of any market, stocks, cars, houses, shoes, I am investing everything I have into
all
it.
in.
I don't know when we're at the bottom. But I can look backwards to the last 50 years of any index you want to measure, whether it's population density, whether it's new construction, whether it, anything in the Ohio Valley, median levels of income, median sales price of houses. It's always been a slow trending line for housing prices going upward.
Every time. And so some of these commenters, maybe they're right. Maybe this is the time that in 3 or 4 years, we're going to see values crash and burn. It hasn't happened for the last 50 years in the Ohio Valley. Maybe this is it. My money's on that trend line continuing exactly how it is. We're in the trenches every day on this, right? We're talking to buyers and sellers, and we know, not just looking at the numbers, we know from the activity, from what happens when we make an offer on something, that values are strong. They have been strong. Buyers are buying. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, and my question to the naysayers about whether, and again, you're more than welcome to disagree, and if you do disagree, let me know in the comments.
Yeah,
because
fire away, man. We love it.
This is what we live for.
Captain Controversy here. Let's go.
But my question is, what defines a real estate crash? Is it a 10% reduction in price? Is it 20, 30, 40? When you get to half, if you bought a house for $300,000 and now it's 150, that's a crisis.
Sure.
But if I bought a house for $100,000 and it drops even to $90,000, yeah, it's annoying, especially if I have to sell tomorrow through some type of, life
Sure.
event. But it's not life altering, at least in that sense.
It's also very temporary.
Yeah, exactly.
History tells us that if there's a temporary slight reduction in values, which we almost never
Never see, yeah.
give it a minute. It's kind of like the old joke about the weather here, right? If you don't like the weather in Ohio, just wait an hour.
Well, yeah, you'll go through all 4
Yeah,
seasons.
if you don't like that your value has dropped, just give it a few days or a month or so, and it's going to go back up, because that's what's happened every single time. Every time we've looked at numbers for the last 40 years,
2 steps forward, 1 step back.
every time.
All right. Well, you have anything else you want to add to
No,
the?
man,
Okay.
this was fun.
Yeah. Well, keep the comments coming, guys. We love them. We'll see you on the next podcast. Thanks very much.